Now, there's been an ugly side to this Anzac Day, however, and that's the political debate. This, as you know, is a perilous time with Russia brutalising Ukraine and China rattling its sabre and expanding its strategic reach. National security and defence is a strength for the government in this election campaign, but with Solomon Islands inking that security deal with China, the Labor opposition isn't blaming Honiara or Beijing, it's blaming Canberra.
If there is a Chinese military base in the Pacific, Australia at that moment is less safe. And the fact that we find ourselves asking these questions in this moment says everything about the failure of Scott Morrison in his managing of the relationships in the Pacific, and specifically Scott Morrison's failure to manage the relationship with Solomon Islands. Because of Scott Morrison's failures, Australians are less safe.
It's a pretty extraordinary attack, isn't it, any time, let alone on Anzac Day? And it underscores the point I've made often on this program, that Labor and the broader left seem to find it impossible to argue Australia's case in foreign affairs whenever the coalition is in power. To them, it's Australia that's always at fault. And to be frank, I reckon away from the feral inanity of Twitter or the street protesting lefties, I don't think most Australians like that attitude. In fact, they're not silly enough to agree with it. I mean, sure, criticise the government's diplomacy, say they could have done more, suggest something different, there's an idea. But to blame Australia for dirty deals done between the Solomon Islands and China, deliberately kept secret, I might add, well, no one would seriously make that case. No one except the Chinese propaganda outfits, that is. And Richard Marles, the acting Labor leader right now, he's the same man who argued in a book last year that China should be welcomed into the Pacific, virtually issuing an invitation for deeper Chinese involvement in the region. And he also made a speech in Beijing in 2019 welcoming increased military cooperation with China, a speech that he showed to the Chinese government before delivery on a trip paid for by taxpayers. A speech, by the way, he didn't post on his website. Yet now he's the point man for Labor's China and national security attack on the government. This is problematic for the party of Sam Dastyari. Remember him, the Labor senator who a few years back destroyed his political career by taking cash for personal expenses from Chinese donors and spruiking Chinese foreign policy arguments in a media event. And of course, former Labor luminaries like Paul Keating and Bob Carr, they constantly run pro-Beijing arguments. They've gone quiet so far in this election campaign. Little wonder then that the coalition is making sure voters have got no doubt where they stand.
We have to be realistic that people like Hitler and others aren't just a figment of our imagination or that they're consigned to history. We have in President Putin at the moment somebody who's willing to kill women and children, and that's happening in the year 2022. The Chinese are, through their actions, through their words, on a very deliberate course at the moment, and we have to stand up with countries to stare down any act of aggression to make sure that we can keep peace in our region and for our country.
Yeah, remember after the leaders' debate last week, I said the big takeout was Albanese's border protection stuff, of course, but also China, the way Scott Morrison was ensuring the China debate would be amplified. Now, that's obviously come to pass. And Labor can hardly complain about this being a hardball debate when they're running an ad like this one in Melbourne.
What do we know about Liberal Gladys Liu? She spread fake news on Chinese messaging apps. She and the Liberal Party had to give back $300,000 because the donors were deemed a national security risk.
Now, there's been some criticism of this attack, this ad as being a racist attack. I don't think it's racist. I think it's hard politics played against an MP who's made some clear mistakes in this area. But if Labor can attack Gladys Liu for being soft on China, they better get ready for some harsh verdicts on Richard Marles, on Penny Wong, on Brendan O'Connor and Anthony Albanese. Yes, Albanese, remember him? He's still in COVID isolation. Presumably he'd be doing plenty of media appearances. We've asked after his health, and there's no word from the campaign headquarters that he's ill. So I wish they'd tell us whether he's crook, because we've got to wonder why he isn't doing more interviews, more appearances from isolation. Most politicians have been able to do that. With less than 4 weeks to polling day, it'd be strange indeed for Labor to be hiding their candidate.